right, Travis, got a question for you. I had this conversation with a coach recently, and with the emphasis of getting the ball in the air over the course of the last 5 years, do you think that combined with controlled cage settings, which is usually front toss, so our controlled cage setting I would define as lack of velocity on a pitch.
Okay.
So the emphasis of getting the ball in the air, lack of velocity in a training setting has led to the epidemic, I'll call it now, of barrel dumping by giving hitters a false sense of security and satisfaction of I'm achieving the goal in this controlled setting, albeit once I get into a competitive environment, I get blown up. So do you think the way that most people have trained in the majority has caused the plethora of barrel dumpers?
I think there's probably 2 points in there. I would say point number one, I think, there's still the issue of you're probably getting some uneducated thoughts because they hear, parents or whoever hears certain terms, they don't quite understand, whether it be launch angle or get the ball in the air or whatever else it ends up being, that I think you get people that get misconceptions that they just need to get under the ball, which probably is going to lead, the common person more to a barrel dump because they're just trying to get depth under the ball to get it back up in the air. And obviously a slower pitch allows that to happen. Plus a slower pitch is going to, so knowing that a slower pitch is going to have a greater arc on the way down, the line going up is going to be a little bit more extreme anyways. Run a pitch that's, let's say, 7-8 degrees, you're gonna have a less line if you're behind the ball anyways than you would on something that's going to be dropping more. I think, going back to all of it, growing up, when we would go and play home run derby, I wasn't trying to hit ground balls. I wasn't trying to hit, line drives through the shortstop. I was trying to hit a ball in the air as far as I could. But I also realized, like, in a game that a lot of that was unrealistic because even when we played home run derby, if your friends threw too firm in home run derby, you tell them to slow it down because you wanted a big old leg kick and you wanted this big bat sweep. And I think, even without thinking about it as a kid, you knew that you couldn't pull that off in a game. Like I couldn't have that leg kick in a game because my leg kick, I might have hung for 15 seconds and I might have over rotated, 40 degrees. And like, I knew I couldn't pull it off in the game. That doesn't mean I wasn't trying to hit balls hard in the game and trying to, to do damage. I think, the biggest thing, like for me, when I think about that is, again, I think you get certain people that probably jump on an idea without understanding why the idea has come into culture. Like the idea came into culture because you can now go and pull up every single batted ball in play in the big leagues. And you could say any ball hit over 12 degrees that is 90 plus is 97% hit rate or whatever ends up being the number. It's exceedingly high.
You're really close to the number. I pulled this up and I might be off by 20 points or 10 points or so, but I'm going to be close. Of various hits in the big leagues, all at 100 miles an hour with different launch angles. And at 10 degrees, the batting average for 10-degree hit at 100 miles an hour is like 968, right? Like, the only way that a player is getting out, then I'm thinking, is probably the second baseman in short right field, probably catching line drives there once in a while. But yeah, it's astronomical. If you hit the ball on the line, you're pretty much guaranteed to get a hit if you hit it hard.
Yeah. So again, you look at that and you go, we see those numbers, and you could see, like, obviously how those numbers change to eventually pretty close to 100% once you get to 100 at 25 degrees or whatever it ends up being. But you're then taking youth kids and you're saying, hey, you can't hit a ball 100, but let's keep trying to, like, get this ball in the air. And there's a certain point where when you don't have that exit speed, hitting the ball in the air doesn't do you justice. and getting the ball higher up without exit speed is just basically a guaranteed out. And I think, people started looking at that, and that's why, I think analytics always gets the crap end of, a lot of people's conversations, is that you take something like that where we can tell you, listen, man, all you got to do is get a ball on flight somewhere over basically infield at a relatively good rate of speed, and you're going to get a hit. And then it becomes, oh, you're trying to get the ball in the air. And then that means, oh, well, let's get the ball in the air. Like, let's get it up there. You know what I mean? Like, so I think there's misconceptions. So I think, part of that is, also the strategy and understanding of whoever is parlaying this information to the kids, whether it's us through social media, and I say us, I mean coaches, not just elite, but coaches through social media, or parents giving the information to the kids, or other coaches during practice, or whatever ends up being the case. It eventually comes down to, how does that information get disseminated?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, context is everything, right?
Yeah. So I mean, that's a huge part of it. And I think, it's important then, that people use a little bit of their own intelligence when they're intaking information. Like, are we telling you to just, hey, tip your body and just try to drive this ball as high as you can up? Or we take your bat and, scrape the ground and then get it up and try to drive balls up? Or are we simply saying, just logistically, if a ball's coming down at 8 degrees and we're going up at 8 degrees, and we square it slightly under center, it's going to go up at a higher degree than 8 degrees. Well, there's your 10 degrees, there's your 12 degrees. It's not trying to get so much depth under the ball that we're fighting to get back up to it. And then we're clipping a bunch of balls. And then the balls that we do square, if we don't have the right exit speed, are just going to be, mid to deep fly balls. So I think that's part of it. And I think, you probably got a big part of the dump under culture. But I would also say that, going back to another conversation we had before, I still feel like most kids, especially, are one posture swingers, and they land in the same posture no matter the pitch height. Most pitchers are taught at a young age to still throw the ball down, not up. So you're not getting, most youth kids aren't like going to the big league level yet where they're trying to throw high fastball, spin right up in the zone. Also because they don't have the breaking ball to throw down in the zone with it. So they're taught to throw the ball still down in the zone. So if I land in a high posture, the only way to get there is to dump my barrel and try to race to get down behind it before the ball gets by me, or to basically just shoot the bat down and just bang the ball straight in the dirt. So I think, for a lot of kids, when they're thinking, hey, I got to get this ball over the infield, can't get it over the infield going this way. So my thought's got to be, if I'm in a tall posture, that barrel's got to race that way to try to get behind it before the ball gets past me. So I think there's a little bit of both in there. It's a good question.
So here's where I'm going with this: is soft toss, front toss bad? That's a jaded question a little bit, but I know you and I have gone to way more. You can sit on a bucket, or you can. I tend to throw for my knees, but instead of doing front toss underhand, we do a lot more overhand flat toss and a little firmer.
I stopped doing underhand flips probably 2.5 years ago, 2.5 years ago, for the same reason. It was like, I'm sitting here thinking about the logistics of a couple things. Like mine wasn't even initially because I could do a firm underhand flip. Like, that's not an issue. But in my mind, a lot of it was just like the sight line that a kid is watching through. And obviously the ball flight's going to change if I'm throwing the ball this way, whether I'm throwing it underhand, up, down. But like the sight line, if my hand is low and a kid is always looking down at my hand, which is closer to my knee, and then they're swinging that way, versus now when the pitch comes and their body's got to be more upright looking out, was part of the big reason I went to initially to overhand short, as I'd call it, short toss.
Yeah, I think I saw you doing it and just copied it. I think I was like, wow, that makes so much sense. Why am I doing underhand toss? Especially with the people we were working with a lot at that time were professional players. Like, well, I need to find a way to get this ball up in the zone. I'm going to be able to do that better from an overhand position than an underhand position.
But how much of the underhand is just like the history of how development has come along? Because you're getting a lot of times older coaches, let's say, who maybe their arms aren't moving quite as well as they used to. And for them to sit and have to go overhand all the time and throw was probably more difficult. It's easy just kind of flip underhand. You get a lot of parents who can't do probably very accurate overhand from any kind of distance whatsoever. So for them, underhand is probably easier. So I think it just became this like, this is how we trained. Like, oh, I take this underhand flip. Because even then, like most of our, I mean, I don't know about you, I guess, but like, you know, my dad didn't throw a ton of BP. Like we would go and hit off a machine or whatever. But like when my dad would throw, it wouldn't be even from the front. It would be like those underhand side flips. You know, he'd stand across.
Yeah, I would do side toss. I never did front toss till I got to college.
Yeah.
I did my parents would do side toss. And again,
Right.
I had a cage in my yard, and my mom threw very good BP all the way till I finished my career. My dad, not so much. I used to cuss at my dad. Looking back on that, it's kind of mean, but I was like, God damn it, Dad, do I need to get Mom out here to throw? You're so bad. That'd piss him off, and he got a little better eventually. But yeah, I never did front toss until I got to college.
Yeah, so I think that plays a part in it too. I think it's just been such commonplace to just, oh, now we go from T to underhand flip to eventually overhand. And that's like the progression of growing up. It's T, which is really easy, then like underhand, which is, well, that's got to be easy. And then, oh, now let's go overhand. And I think, you know, all that stuff plays a part in how kids develop. And, you know, we've made mistakes. And I think, you know, not that underhand is going to ruin a kid. I mean, underhands work for a bunch of generations before us, I guess a little bit, but I think for the like just training overall, what we're trying to accomplish, keeping it as game-like as possible, obviously overhand would make more sense in that realm.
Okay, so let's go to the other end of this, because controlled toss does have its place still. Like in my mind, and anybody that's heard me talk, I've said this on infield play as well as hitting, you work slow and close before you work far and fast, because as you add distance and velocity, everything becomes harder. So when do we institute velocity? Because, you know, if you just say, well, slow bad, fast good, the game plays at a fast speed, I might as well just train it fast. And that is more the test. In what are your feelings of when we should actually institute velocity and that test? Should I do it right away?
I do, like, so I would typically say in a setting where I start with a kid. So like the first time I had a kid, and I think we probably covered this a little bit. I probably talked about this on a different episode, but I like to do the first day, just like interview, ask them, you know, why they're here, what's been going on, where do they feel like their strengths and weaknesses are, yada, yada, yada. And then I like to go typically into a throw. So I'm like, hey, let me throw you here right away. Just kind of see like, how do you hit currently before we start to make changes. This is obviously like assessment, all the yada, yada, yada stuff. But, and then I'll let them hit. And if they're barreling the ball, I'll just keep increasing the speed until their consistency drops. And then I'll kind of know, okay, at about this speed, you know, in your reaction time, this is where you start to change either your swing pattern, or you start to panic, or you start to make worse decisions at pitches you're going to swing at, or whatever ends up being the case. And then we'll kind of start making corrections from there. So as I go, then as time progresses, I would say probably for me, probably every other session, we will have an over velo day. And we do it kind of just as, like, I always call it like a heat check. Like, hey, you've been squaring up some balls, you've been moving a little bit better here, you've been cutting some of that extra space out of your swing or extra depth out of your swing. You know, let's see where we're at. And, you know, I had a kid, I had a kid the other day, turned on the pitching machine, set it at 90. The kid's 13. And the kid's got a pretty good swing. Like he's pretty good mover when it comes to path. Like
Is this the same kid that's in my hitting class on the weekends?
I'm not sure.
6'2", 13-year-old.
No, not that guy. This guy's a switch hitting 13-year-old. And but I turned it up to 90, and I was like, listen, like, I'm not expecting you to just sit here and barrel these balls, but let's just see where you're at. Like, let's see what you feel like. Let's see if you can stay relaxed. Let's see if you can, you know, get your barrel to even like foul some of these balls off or whatever. I said, we're using this as a heat check, because part of that is then going to be like, hey, let's have a conversation after and be like, hey, what do you feel like you'd still need to do better to catch up to this? Knowing that at 13, he's not going to see 90 probably for another four to 5 years, depending on, you know, what his high school layout looks like, or, you know, how high level of a travel team he's on. But I'm like, you're not going to see it for that long, so I don't expect you to hit it, but let's just let's see what you look like against it. Then let's have a talk about how you felt. And that way we can keep planning on, hey, what do we need to keep focusing on a little bit in our sessions based on what you're feeling like. Man, I feel like I don't have time, or I feel like I couldn't get going quick enough, or I feel like, I panicked too much. And then it starts another conversation about, okay. So honestly, like I won't sit and do it for a whole session unless a kid's ready for like, hey, like this is where you need to be. Like this is the level you're at. This is where you need to be. We need to be at this speed. And even then, like, it's that, it's that little bit of like, do we build a little confidence today, or do we be realistic in what's going on? Right. So every kid's obviously different, as you know, like even every pro guy you work with is different. Like they're all going to need a little bit of different, like in this moment, do I need to just force you out of your comfort zone and find a way through this? Or do I need to pull back a little bit and let you keep your confidence and kind of just implement this a little bit slower?
Yeah, I still go slow with younger kids first, because I feel like the biggest thing that they lack in terms of hitting is body control. And I think back even to when I was like 11 years old, I had a pitching machine, the old Iron Mike, had it in my yard. And my brother was 6 years older than me. So when I was 11 and in Little League, he was a senior in high school. So he would have the pitch machine and all of his friends on, like, it was just like the place where anybody that played baseball just hung out at my house in the summertime, and we just hit all day. But they weren't going to like lower the speed of the machine when I jumped in the cage. And of course I wanted to be able to keep up with them. So at 11, I was hitting the machine at like one of its fastest speeds. So let's say, and it was about 60 feet away. So let's say it was 85 miles an hour, and I could hit it, and I could hit line drives off of it. However, I would go to my Little League game that night, and I was so bad of anybody that threw under hitting speed. I mean, so bad. Jumping to my front leg, had no body control, lunging, hands coming with me. And I would get so frustrated because I could hit really fast pitching, and I couldn't hit, which was like what, one or two pitchers in the league that actually throw hard when you're in a small town. And 15 of them that I was facing on a regular basis, who I was a much better athlete, they would get me out because I couldn't stay back on a slow pitch. So I think back to like body control being an issue, and I want to teach. I would consider body control just being a better mover. I'll teach the movement before I bring on the velocity.
So with youth kids, then, do you feel like it's important to have days where you just intentionally throw slow? Not even as like a, hey, this is an off.
And I do that. I do that with pro guys too at times. I think the variant, when anytime you go to the polar extremes of velocity, it gets really hard. So, and I do think you need to train both. And they, as you said, everybody is different. So some guys you're going to float more often one way than the other, but I certainly think it has its place.
So let's take it the other way from what you asked me, and you dealing obviously with pro players more regularly than anything else. How often do you feel like they need to use, let's say, either a machine or be facing something live versus just like a controlled BP or whatever their prep T or whatever their other work is? Like, do they every day need to be facing something that's game speed like, because that's the speed they already face on a daily basis?
I do believe that. Yeah. Like in cage work with professional hitters on a daily basis, let's say you're out at camp, they'll still do routines. We'll still, there'll be some slow controlled work, but I would say in the course of a day, that is less than 20% of the work. And then it gets, I believe in challenge practice. So practice is very difficult. And if it's on a field, it's even more difficult than it's game speed. So it's oftentimes high spin rate, really fast pitching, changes of velocity, changes in sight. But I am not a believer for the guys that have to compete at the very, very highest level that anything but challenge BP is actually helping them.
Okay, that makes sense.
I recall back to the talking about the barrel dump. The very first time I put my daughter on a tee, she was probably 5, maybe 4. And the only instruction I gave her was showing her how to stand, like get in an athletic stance. And then she was hitting some balls. And of course, you're going to miss hit a lot of balls when you're first starting off. And jokingly, but not jokingly, I said to her, I said, okay, well, I want you to hit the ball hard in the air, hit it on a line, and don't hit it on the ground. I said, I want you to do anything but hit it on the ground, hit it hard on the line. She goes, why, Dada? I said, because not even your mom is going to cheer for you when you hit it on the ground. I said, when have you ever been to a baseball game where anybody clapped for a ground ball? So I'm as guilty as anybody else of doing that. But I think that's a good conversation of like, if you're only doing front toss, are you potentially putting your player in a position to fail in a game if you're not challenging with velocity? I do think there's some truth to that.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those things too. Like, we could use this as like an end of segment thing, or I could throw it in the middle here, which I will do. But I would say that's another one of those aha moments that I had, and that would be like a don't be that guy kind of moment again. Is, having done this now for over 16 years, I've seen so many people that I've been next to in cages, in multiple different locations, in tons of different atmospheres. And I would sit and watch, I'm always kind of like watching around me, just, hearing different things, picking up different things, trying to listen to like, how people navigate what we do outside of what I hear myself doing. And I would have these coaches next to me, and I'd be like, man, like their kids just smash baseballs. Like this, they just be like bang, bang, bang. I'm like, wow, man, this kid's fire. And you're looking at it in the moment, I'd look at some of my kids during those times and those lessons, and I'd look at my kids and I'm like I'm just wearing these kids out. I'm like, this kid's just shooting balls the right side. He's late. He's sloppy. He's fighting and he's battling his butt off, but like he might barrel one out of every like 6. But he's up there like stepping out, taking a breath, like, all right, let's go, man. Like let's go here.
Eating in a lesson.
And yes, and it would be like a lot of times, like, in the moment I wasn't thinking about it. I was just like, all right, well, I got to get this kid to understand how to navigate this better. Like I've got to do a better job so he can feel better. And the kid that I would have, they'd come in after the weekend or whatever it was and be like, oh yeah, I went, 6 for 8 with, 4 doubles. I'm like, oh, nice. And a lot of times the parents like, man, like he just seems like he doesn't hit well in here, but he goes out in the games and he just hits everything. And I would hear a lot of times the kids in the cage next to me, the parents like, oh man, he crushes it here in the cage, but every time he goes out in the game, he just looks lost. You know what I mean? And then I started thinking about it. I'm like, well, part of that was, and I'm talking about kids, obviously at this point, like more like the high school age where I'm throwing harder too.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, you know what? Like some of those coaches are just throwing like a nice, easy BP. And at that age, like if you're a high school kid and somebody's throwing you easy BP and you're having a hard time being able to square the majority of the balls, like you've got some work to do ahead of you. You know what I mean?
And hold that thought for a second then, because is this then a problem in the facility / lesson structure where you're teaching for success in the lesson, wanting a kid, and there's nothing wrong with making a kid feel good about himself. Like I'm not saying that, like we want to have a positive influence on these kids, but that positive influence, I hope, comes from game success, not making them feel good for 30 minutes in the moment and sending them out the door with a false sense of security. Is that what you're getting at?
100%. Yeah. Cause that's it.
Because you want him to come back, right? You want Johnny to be happy. So he keeps coming back for lessons.
I think a lot of times too, it's like, it's the kid, but it's also the parent. Like, when the kid has a good lesson, which would be like, oh, my kid looked like he barreled a bunch of balls today. This is great. He must be getting better because he's barreling balls. Like we've done this long enough. Like if I wanted a kid to barrel a ball, I can throw it at the speed where the ball needs to be based off of what their swing is. Like I'm like, all right, this guy jumps a little bit yet. Let me just go a little bit lower with the ball, slow it down a little bit so he can catch it out front. Just let this guy pound balls all day so he can leave here and feel good about himself. But he's going to go in the game and he's going to get blown up. So yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it becomes that, like, and I've had to have this conversation with parents numerous times where like a kid will be in my lesson and he will just struggle. And it's not that he's struggling because he's not moving well or that he's not even a good hitter. It's once he gets to a point where he's being able to manage what I'm doing, I have to go to the next step. Like if I'm throwing 5, 6, 7 pitches on, let's say I'm going fastball and I'm going at, a decent speed, maybe a little under game speed yet, and they're bang, 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 I'm not going to keep throwing that speed. Like I'm going to be like, all right, if we're not doing a variance round where I'm throwing off speed and doing a bunch of other stuff, it's going to be like, hey, I'm going to go faster and let's see what you got. And if he sits there like for the first 2 or 3 figures out his timing and then feels comfortable again, and then it starts going bang, 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 I have to go faster again. And it's like, all right, I got to go faster here because right now you're comfortable there. And at some point you're going to be uncomfortable in a game. And I would rather have you uncomfortable in here and failing in here. So you feel like the game is easier. And that's, for all my kids, like it's one of the first conversations we have. I said, practice is going to be physically and mentally draining a lot of times because I'm going to try to make this more difficult in a lot of ways than it is in the game so that you feel like the game is the easy, fun part. And in here is the work. So you're not all of a sudden saying, hey, I've gotten to this point in my lessons and I feel comfortable and now the game's harder than my lesson. Well, now I'm not going to do good in the game. And at some point, I'm going to translate that to I'm not practicing well, or I'm not doing practice isn't going well enough. Or you're going to be the people that are like, oh, he hits good in here, but he can't hit in the game. And they'll just be like, oh, well, maybe you just as a coach need to be there for him at the game. No, I need to make this more difficult in here. So I'm not coming to the game.
I got something for you. You've been doing a ton more lessons than I have, but I've noticed this in my weekend classes. I've always really wanted parents around during the lessons because obviously they're going to be with them more than we are. And I want them to learn alongside their child. But have you noticed, and maybe it's just me, but because of COVID and parents not coming in the building with the student, I feel like our students have gotten way better and like they're just way more dialed in.
Considerably still obviously look up to my father. Like how my father views me matters to me. Like it matters that he sees that I've hopefully grown up to be something that he feels like he did what he wanted to do to raise me. So it matters to me that. And kids not being able to look at their parents or worry about, oh, I missed that ball. I wonder what my parents are going to say. I wonder, like, I'm going to have a conversation in the car on the way home because I didn't hit the ball well enough today, or I didn't throw well enough today. Like, oh, hey Johnny, you didn't throw enough strikes today. Like, what's going on? We got to really try to dial you in on strikes. When I'm sitting in the lesson going, listen, I don't care if you throw strikes today. Let's be a better mover today. And maybe next week we'll worry about being a good mover and throwing strikes, and we'll blend it that way. But right now I need you to do this. And the parents sometimes I think the parents still like look at the kid like they're supposed to be as good of an athlete as a big league player. Like they're supposed to throw strikes at that kind of level, or they're supposed to be able to have that kind of body control in every single swing so that they can square every single ball up, which is unrealistic. So I think that plays a part in it where, kids just want to make their parents happy. Like they want.
That's what I was thinking. Like there's anxiety with the parent being around and you're trying to please. The focus goes from what am I trying to do to get better with this instructor? So I'm dialed in with those cues or whatever the task is to my focus is I'm trying to please my parent. So if you're a parent, like listening to this, it's a lot to be said because I don't know, like nobody's doing that maliciously for their child. At least I hope not. I have had that a couple of times where it's been 10 years or more that I actually had twice. I had to kick 2 parents out of lessons. Said, can't come in anymore. Can't get anywhere near the cage. You're actually holding back from me doing my job because you're like the hover parent. But
no, that's
very rare does that happen. But still, the anxiety of trying to please a parent versus actually achieving a skill in a lesson.
Well, and that's the same, but it's the same thing for us as well, right? It's like there's a certain point where, again, this goes back to how this conversation started. There's a certain point where, like, when parents aren't seeing their kid in a setting where they're supposed to be getting better and learning, and their kid's struggling in that scenario, that it becomes like, hey, is this the coach's fault? Like, is he just not being able to get my kid to do what he needs to do? So you still have that sometimes, like, obviously we've done this long enough now where I'm not doing this and I'll have the conversation with the parent, like, listen, if we're struggling here, it's okay. Like, your kid's gonna be fine. Like, just trust what's going on here. But it goes the same way. It's like, you're gonna get some certain coaches that are gonna like want to slow the ball back down a little bit so the kid can hit the ball well, so the parents can see the kid hitting well, so that they want to, not, maybe it might even be just so that the parent isn't going to be, tougher on the kid in the car afterwards. And like you said, I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm all high and mighty. There's times I've had to walk out of my son's soccer practice because he'll be doing something and he'll, accomplish whatever task they're doing. And his first thing is like this, like, Dad, what do you think? And I'm like, go, man, just do your thing. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not here for that. And then there's been times where I've instituted the best I can. And I say best I can because I've obviously failed a little bit at this too, but I've instituted like a 12 and 24-hour, like, no talk after games policy. Like, when my son gets in the car after a game, it's not immediately like, bro, why didn't you do this? And what, you got to be more aggressive there. And, what about this? And hey, whatever, because, kids know when they didn't do well, and they don't need it. And it's hard because, like, as a parent, we want to make sure that they're learning. And sometimes our way of making sure that they're learning is to just tell them what's going on. And a lot of times they know, and then they just feel more defeated because they already were defeated or struggled in a game. Then they're getting it from the one person or the couple people that they look up to the most. And then it's like, now I've let down my team and I've let myself down and now I've let you guys down. And now it's like, it becomes overwhelming for a lot of kids to have that just constantly put in them. So, I've done the best I can, like when his games end, to be like, hey man, great job. Like, you guys battled hard today as a team, or whatever it ends up being. And then, like, maybe the next day, if we're going to go out and kick a soccer ball or wherever else and do stuff, then we'll talk about, hey, in the game, there was that guy and you panicked, you just kicked the ball away. Like, got to work on some ball control there and try to work on being able to navigate getting around him or setting up for a pass versus just kicking in a random direction because you're worried about the guy taking it from you. And then we'll have that conversation then as we're practicing. And it'll be like, all right, let's set this up. And that's given him some time to decompress where he's not worried about getting in the vehicle after the game with me. So yeah, I think there's definitely something to be said for parents not being in, but there are those couple kids that probably act a fool a little bit more because they know that their parents are not watching. Now, it's definitely not the majority. It's just a few kids that
you're dealing with a lot more kids than I am, so I'm sure you have that. I haven't had that experience, but I could see that happening with just a couple.
Yeah.
You always have that, right?
Right, and those are the ones that kind of goof around a little bit with their parents in there, anyways. And the parents are kind of like, "Come on, like, stand back up. Why are you laying on the ground?" but
I forgot about those days. I had, oh my God, I had this regular client 10 years ago. Great kid too. He ended up playing college baseball, which was awesome. But when I first started lessons with him, it was an hour like every Saturday or Sunday. And he would be one of those rolling around on the ground and they're like, come on, get up. And one time there was just a battle of wills. Like, I'm not telling him to get up anymore. And he came in for an hour lesson and he literally stood and looked at the clock for like 58 minutes. And I just let him. I stood there with my arms folded. It's like, I'm not giving in. I'm not giving in. And the lesson's over. He looks at the clock and goes, can I go now? I'm like, yep. It's like, the parent knew it. It was like, I think they just wanted to get this kid out of their hair for an hour. But like, I'm not fighting him anymore if he doesn't want to play. Of course, I told him, I was like, this may not be the best investment for you. He's like, no, trust me, but it ended up working out. After it was probably him being 7 or 8, he did end up being a college baseball player, which is awesome. But yeah, I remember those days. So I think back, like, my parents were pretty hard on me. We came from a different era. I remember being locked out of the house on a day I'd go over. We had a backsliding door that you could see our batting cage from there. So it was basically, if I had an over day, I just had to hit until I could hear the door click, unlock, and I could come back inside. If I made an error in a game, it was 100 ground balls after the game, like no questions asked. Mom was standing there at the edge of the dugout, bat on the shoulder, bucket in hand, 100 ground balls if I made an error.
See, mine was slightly different there because, like, my dad, who was also my coach through some of my youth, some as a head coach, some as like an assistant coach through like Little League and stuff like that. He was always the more like we're out here to have fun when we're playing games.
Oh, not my house, man.
No, but
if you're
but he was also
if you're not first, you're last in the Stone house.
oh, yeah. Well, I mean, it was like if he was always like if we're having fun, we're gonna win. Now, here's the thing. I mean, we won our Little League championship with if we're having fun, we're gonna win. But on the other side of it, my dad has always been if you're gonna do something, be the best, which means like hard work ethic. And it wasn't like, hey, I had a bad day, you got to go whatever. But it was mandatory that I take 100 swings every day, whether they be just dry swings in the back. I mean, I didn't have a cage, but whether it be dry swings or whether it be me throwing the ball to myself or whatever it was, like it was like you're gonna take 100 swings today. If you're gonna hit the tire 100 times, whatever you're gonna do, it's 100 swings a day. And it wasn't like a punishment based off of like how I did, but it was like, you're going to put in work. If this is what you choose to do, like, you're not forced to play baseball. You choose to play baseball. If you're going to choose to do something, you need to do what you're doing because, whatever. So like we did the work, but like game wise, it was always like, and yeah, I mean, there were times it'd be like, you'd be like, what were you doing today? Like, what were you doing out there today? I'm like, yeah, I don't know. But
yeah, if you're a parent out there, and it's probably goes without saying, don't yell at your kid in the middle of the game. That doesn't help. My dad had the loudest voice, and I'd make an error, and he'd yell at me to get my head out of my ass, which was slightly embarrassing. Just like it wasn't good. Yeah, they weren't bad parents, by the way. They were just really hard on me in terms of sports, but it ended up working out because it's kind of the same thing you were talking. Like you teach work ethic, you teach that if better is possible, then good is not good enough.
But going back to it, honestly, I think there's a certain point that if parents are comfortable stepping away, if you are putting your kid in a learning environment, if you're comfortable stepping away, honestly, now that we've gone through this, I would say step away. Like let your kid navigate on his own. I've had kids. I would say the biggest difference for me since parents not being in there is kids talk considerably more. And I think a lot of times, like when I ask questions, they always kind of look at their parents like, what should I say?
Yeah, that's a good point.
A lot of times when the kids walk in.
No, man, don't look at him, look at me. I'm asking you the question.
Well, and the kids walk in, right when they're walking in the cage, I'm like, hey, what do you need today? And, at that point, the kid and the parent are probably still standing close to each other. And the kid's just coming in the cage. I'm just lifting up the cage for the kid to come in. I'm like, hey, how you doing? What do you need today? Like, what do you need from me today? Like, what do we got to do? And the kid will kind of turn back like, okay, well, my dad kind of wants me to do this because they've had that conversation or something like that. Or, their coach from their team had told them something or told the parent something. And then the parent told the kid or like, I don't know what to say. I don't want to say the wrong thing. And I think there's been a big difference in just kids being able to narrate what they're thinking because I feel like they're not as worried about saying the wrong thing or whatever. And again, it's not that it's the parents' fault. It's because the kids look up to them so much. As a kid, man, like your parents are your everything at that point. You know what I mean? Like that's who supports you, who takes care of you. It's who is your first and biggest teacher, like all that stuff. And I think when your kid is ready, or even sometimes before your kid is ready, to be able to just pull back and like let them prove that they've been paying attention to everything that you've given them through their entire life so far to this point, I think is a huge thing. I'd much rather have the parents at that point. I'd much rather have the parents text me, after the lesson, say, hey, how do you do? I want to be able to keep up some of the stuff you're doing. And he doesn't always remember everything you've done in the lessons and why you did it. And if you want to just give me a quick synopsis of what you guys did and what we need to focus on through something afterwards, honestly, is much better. I've told parents, like, have your kid set up a camera if you want to set up a camera and just videotape the entire lesson. And as a parent, if you want to watch it back later, then watch it back later. Like, I don't mind. Like, I've got nothing to hide in here. Like, doesn't matter to me.
People always ask that, do you mind if I film this? I'm like, no, I encourage you to film this. This is your time, and I want you to learn along with it.
Yeah. So I think that's a big part too. Just kids being able to communicate better. And a lot of times they do that better that way.
So we're going to get into our "Don't Be That Guy" segment of the day. What do you got? And I have one as well, but it's your segment, Travis. So I'll let you lead it off.
Well, you heard the first "Don't Be." You heard the first kind of "Don't be that guy." Don't make your kid feel always great in the cage and then let them struggle in a game because they haven't been forced into that mode yet. Just so you feel better as a coach that the kid hit well and felt well leaving. Confidence is incredibly important. Not going to ever knock having confidence, but you got to be real. Like there's a difference between confidence in a cage and confidence in a game. But the real "Don't be that guy," man, I swear, like I could probably find this every single week at this point. Don't be that guy. So
Hardee's is probably going to sponsor this part of the segment. Still looking. Producer Dan's been reaching out to Hardee's and Robinson for months now, trying to get them on board. I was like, just give me some free hot ham and cheese coupons, for Christ's sake.
Yeah. Just like give us a free whiff, just this free smell, what they smell like. Don't be that guy. So if you're in your lesson and you've got a kid in your cage, and this happened this week, and you're having to list off every athlete that you've taught and every home run and every glory day thing that you did, like there's a problem. Like, don't be that guy. This kid is already in your cage. They're already ready to learn. They don't need a 15-minute synopsis of everything you've accomplished in your career as a coach to believe in what you're doing. If you think that parents
listed off their resume in the cage,
yes. If you think that parents haven't done a little bit of research before they start dropping money to put somebody in a cage with you, meaning like either somebody else that's a close friend of the family works with this coach, and they're like, hey, this guy's done wonders for our kid, and that family goes, we trust you, we know we've known you forever, we'll go to that coach. Or if you've gone online and you're just searching for a coach, those parents have already looked at the resumes of the coaches on the site. They know who they're putting their kid with. And when that kid's in your cage, if you have to list how good you were as a player, that's not a good thing. Don't be that guy.
You remember when we were teaching in this one facility, and I don't know the guy's name, but he worked in pro ball, and he would bring a boombox in with him, and he would just like yell and dance and say "attaboy," and that was the lesson. It would be so loud, like you couldn't even teach. And actually, there's a boom. Like, dude, can you turn the music down? I'm actually trying to teach over here. That's kind of what I was thinking of there. That's just coming in because of the resume and not actually teaching anything.
Yeah.
For me, my "Don't Be That Guy" this week is don't be unvulnerable, if that's even a word. But here's where I'm going with that. The idea that it's okay not to know something is what drives me as a coach to want to get better. And saying that it's okay to say, I don't know everything, but I'll either learn it or I'll get back to you, or I haven't thought of it that way. It's okay to say that as a coach. In reality, to me, that's what makes the best coaches really good, is that quest for always wanting to get better, knowing that there's still improvement that could be made. And when you get to the point as a coach, and this is cliche-ish, and we've said it a number of times, but it's worth repeating. When you get to the point as a coach where you think you're good enough, you shouldn't be coaching anymore. Or you think that I've had enough experience that I know the way, there's still a better way, right? So don't be the guy that is set in the ways of, I've done enough, I know what it takes to get there, therefore I don't want to open my ears or mind to anything else that could possibly make you better. And the reason that happens, one, is fear. Fear is a big preventative measure for good coaches. The fear of, I'm going to have to work a little harder to learn something new. Fear of, I'm not comfortable with this because I don't know a lot about it because I haven't been exposed to it before. And it's easier to put your hands up and say no for whatever reason, usually all negative reasons, versus saying, let me explore this a little more. To me, that's what separates the good coaches from the loud ones, and don't be that guy.
Well, I'm afraid every day, so every day. Every day. I'm like, man, I didn't do enough.
I'm excited today. I've got a player that has flown in for the next 3 days, and here in about 5 minutes, I'm gonna head over to the facility and get after it.
It's awesome, man. Never gets old. Every day is a new process. It's a new learning. It's a new plan. It's a new everything. So
Yeah,
lucky to have the jobs we have.
no doubt. We make a living on it. I know we've said this before too, and I get this question at every conference we go to. How do I get to the point where I can make a living in baseball? And I'll say the answer that I always say: start off working about 350 days a year for averaging 10 hours a day. I'd say averaging 10 hours a day for about $30,000 a year. And if you can withstand that for a while, you can make it in baseball, because opportunities will arise. But you got to put your time in, man. And you're going to put a lot of time in for not very much money.
I was getting ripped off then because I was only making like 17 for a while.
My first job, I said I made $16,000 as a full-time Division I coach. That's my.
No, it's true though. But that's a really good point though. Before we shut this one down, that's a really good point. I think that we should probably even talk about more, because we get a lot of people that are wanting to do.
Yeah, we should do a segment on that. That could be a future show of just kind of the steps involved.
Yeah, I mean, just
stories along the way,
and what to do if you're looking to do it, or what it is like. Even if you're a parent trying to navigate, trying to better help your kid at home outside of even what we do, or if you're not able to get your kid in, for whatever reasons, whether it be COVID or financially, to have someone assist your kid, like what steps you could take at home to better navigate that too. So,
yep.
Awesome.
True dat. All right,
Hardee's. Hardee's. Don't be that guy.